This is the first Prime Minister's questions for Keir Starmer, who is standing as the leader of the opposition. Obviously, it's nice to have a little bit less hysteria that we used to see from Jeremy Corbyn. He's a bit more forensic. He's a little bit more intelligent, dare I say it. But, of course, he is going after the same targets. He's going after the PPE. He's quoting unnamed unison workers. He's talking about, a survey done by the Royal College of Nursing, which is a union, of course. And he's also asking the question about the number of people who have died who work in the NHS, which, of course, is the first question that Charlotte Ivers asked quite some time ago to Matt Hancock. The interesting thing about the question is that not so much about how important it is about how many people have died, but how many people who died inside the NHS died actually after contracting the coronavirus while working for the NHS, because not all of them did. And I think that's important to point out. Let's ask Charlotte how she thinks Keir Starmer is doing. Charlotte, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mike. That's absolutely right. It's important to know why these people tragically got coronavirus. And that's actually something I tried to ask at a press conference last week.
Yes.
I wanted to know about these investigations Matt Hancock is putting into these deaths. But unfortunately, there don't seem to have been any outcomes, or at least any outcomes they're willing to share from that. I think this is a pretty different and remarkable PMQs, isn't it? As you say,
Yeah.
Keir Starmer, background as a lawyer, clearly a very forensic questioner. But I got a sense that he's being quite challenging, but also quite collegiate in the way he's going about it. But also, crucially, we don't have all of these braying MPs shouting at each other and having to have the two leaders shouting to be heard. So it's a very, very different tone.
Yes, and I mean, I must admit, it is very much more calm. I don't like it as much as the braying, to be honest. But I don't like it when they're being nice to each other. But the one question I would ask you, because we touched upon this yesterday about the number of MPs who were travelling to Westminster to go back to work. I don't really see the need for why people are coming from places like Bradford West, Naz Shah, from Bracknell, James Sunderland, from Telford, Lucy Allen, Ilford, West Streeting. I mean, I'm not travelling. Lots of people are not travelling. Lots of people are not seeing their loved ones or their partners or their dogs. Why on earth do they need to be there?
Well, quite, and we don't know the circumstances in each case. Some of them could be based in London for the lockdown. For example, I was speaking to a member of the House of Lords yesterday who had walked in from his house in London the other day. So some of these that might be fairly reasonable. One that I think might wind you up particularly, and it is someone who's London-based, but it's Jeremy Corbyn will be physically in the chamber for health questions. Got a question to Matt Hancock. He, of course, is 70 years old and therefore is in that particularly at risk group, and a lot of people are saying maybe he should be leading a bit more by example.
Yes, well, perhaps he's started to believe his own hype, that all those Corbynistas who think he can walk on water, he thinks he's indestructible. But, I mean, I suppose you could take the view as well that if he is at a vulnerable time in his life, it's maybe his decision, I suppose.
No, quite, this is the thing, and I think there's a balance to be drawn. A lot of these MPs view it as their public duty to be in the chamber. They view it as vital to the functioning of democracy. Maybe they'll be slightly less keen on that idea once we see that the video links do actually work properly. Yes. I know for a fact that ministers have been asked to definitely be physically present in the chamber, because can you imagine if they got a really tricky question and then suddenly their live feed cut out? I think people would be pretty angry. The conspiracy theorists would be out. So examples like that, I can see a pretty strong case for having people physically present.
Well, I'm watching Ian Blackford now asking his first question. We might have a listen to it in a moment, but it's going to be interesting looking at the backgrounds, because as we've seen from some of the media personnel in the press briefing at late afternoons, he's got a couple of mitre footballs in the background and an old clock and what looks like a card. So it's going to be quite amusing watching where they're all actually coming in from.
No, quite, and they've all been given instructions by the House of Commons. They're quite amusing to have a read of. The Times reported on it this morning. There's lots of stuff about not having anything weird in your background that journalists might find amusing. Don't have just a plain white backdrop. Certainly don't use a virtual backdrop. They were very, very keen. I think running the risk that MPs might be on the beach in the Caribbean or something like that on their Zoom accounts.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, of course, talkRADIO is leading the way here, because we've been able to make sure that the talkRADIO screen is behind both you and Dan Wootton yesterday when he was asking a question live from his own show.
That is true, and MPs have just been given this 10 grand to facilitate home working, so to spend on laptops and whatever other kit they need for their staff. So I'm wondering whether Dan and I could set up some sort of consultancy for how to do your backdrop, and then we might be able to get some of this money.
Exactly right.
I
yeah.
imagine words might be added.
Yes, exactly.